Good morning, one and all. Myself, Vishita Khanna, Assistant Professor, IABMI AU, would like to welcome you all to this one-day webinar on trade in fruits and vegetable products and dairy commodities. I request Dr. R.S. Pundir, Principal Investigator of this project, for his welcome address. Over to you, sir.
Yes, thank you, Vishita. Okay, at this one-day webinar on trade in fruit and vegetable products and dairy commodities. First of all, on behalf of our university, AU Anand, and on my own behalf, I welcome our Honorable Vice Chancellor, though just he has asked us, just he will be joining shortly, and he has gone somewhere immediately, sir. And I also welcome our national coordinator and chief guest of this today's webinar on fruits and vegetable and dairy commodities, Dr. Prabhat Kumar. Sir, we are very, very fortunate that at a very short notice, let's say this thing, sir. Yesterday, we asked you, and you are always with us, sir. Working with you is, we feel very natural and close to your heart. Even sometimes we try to ask you many things, and maybe it's a kind of disturbance in late hours when you are either in office or at home, sir. Sir, it is a privilege for us. And sir, we welcome you at this webinar as chief guest, and we are here to listen to you, sir. And because you have your background in horticulture from IRI, and this webinar is mainly for horticulture products as well as dairy commodities. Sir, one very important point of this project, our project on agriculture market intelligence, is that we are also doing some work on price forecast, demand and supply projections. In case of these fruits and vegetables and some products like dairy products or processed products, sir, there is no systematic way of making projections. And this is very, very important from that point of view. We are trying to collect some information with the help of experts, and even we are having two major experts to address these issues. That is price oscillations or price movements, or a kind of very much variations is there in the prices. So to address these issues on horticulture produce as well as dairy commodities, today we have this one-day webinar. Once again, sir, I welcome you from the bottom of my heart. I also welcome my principal and dean, Dr. Vaishya Jhala, I think, who is there, but he's not. Yes, sir. Who is there always with us since the time of the inception of this project. I also welcome Dr. Samit and Dr. Makwana, sir, in food processing groups. As you know, sir, we are having 7 groups, and Dr. Samit Datta is core co-PI of this group as organizing secretary. Also, most importantly, all the staff members, research stores, research estates or SRFs, and all the staff members, faculties, and most importantly, is the participants who have joined us and who are likely to join. I welcome you all once again to this webinar. Sir, already you know about this thing, so I need not say much, but only few points about those who are new in this project, that this project has completed more than 1 year now, and we are having research component, capacity building, apart from other things, other activities. In research component, sir, this is capacity building program is very, very important component. And this webinar today is a part of this capacity building components under this food processing and dairy products, this subgroup, sir. With these words, sir, I would like Vishita to go for further, probably maybe towards our chief guest for his address. Vishita, over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Pundir, sir, for extraordinary remarks on the project and always guiding us throughout the project. Now it is my pleasure to invite our chief guest, Dr. Prabhat Kumar, National Coordinator, National Agricultural Higher Education Project, NAHIB, ICAR, for his address. He was previously associated with IARI Pusa as Principal Scientist. He is a PhD in Horticulture from IARI, as already mentioned by Dr. Pundir, from New Delhi. To his merits, he has received Dr. Ambedkar Young Fellow Award and Himadri Young Scientist Award. I would also like to thank him for accepting our invite as chief guest in this short span of time, as Dr. R.R.B. Singh could not make it today due to some unavoidable reasons. So we are pleased to have you with us today. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Khanna, for your very kind words. And today we are here to listen our expert in the webinar. And it is said by, it was called in the night and I am ready. The same is true with the trade. If you see the trade, you people are master in that. but I visited WTO in the last, I think before March, I was in WTO. So we had a lot of discussion over that, how we can go for predictability. Because if distortion in the trade is happening only due to the predictability. And the recent example is your basmati export. When in basmati export, it was 100 times the MRL was reduced. It is impossible overnight you can change such type of trade barrier and just have a insulation or resilience of that particular act. The same way, as I know these smart people are here, they will come out with such predictions because chief guest they have managed overnight. So I think the trade barrier, whatever are theirs in the fruit, vegetable and dairy, that we will discuss. And it was just for the light side of the audience. And let me congratulate AU because under the leadership of Dr. Pundir, I have seen a number of activities are going on in such a situation. And let me share with you people, recently we had a MTR, that is our midterm review, the bank mission. It is a very rigorous and very precise, and even though we have mentioned your activities and other activities of our other partners, we are now having the 58 hands as extended family. And finally, they were satisfied. We are waiting in written that admemar that is mutually agreed. And yesterday we had a wrap-up meeting with our higher ups of the country, like DG secretary and finance advisor. They were all happy. And in such a COVID situation, when the challenges you people have converted into opportunity, and the commitment you are showing, that is really appreciable. And I in absence my uh, you know rewardness to your vice chancellor also, because leader matters. So we need an inspirational source from the leader, and I have seen in every program he has been there and he contributed. So in his absence, let me again thank to him also. And today's webinar, I am again welcoming, since though I am a chief guest today, but I am actually part of the family. So that opportunity I am taking to welcome all my participants in this NHEP program. And really, the people used to ask whether the NAHEP has brought some vibrancy or not. In MTR, it was asked, if NAHEP would have not been there, what would have been the situation in agriculture universities? I told them very emphatically, this NAHEP as an input, it has made the campuses more vibrant and productive in nowadays. Because if you see, all activities are halted due to poor supply of the finance. But from the NAHEP side, we are trying our level best to actually continue the flow of the money. So that particular thing has brought, and we are having a good people in one campus. So every day in my all universities are something happening. And in the beginning, just I asked my advert, the TTL, I asked you go and just Google NAHEP in news. Whole page you will find on the Google that NAHEP, 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 NAHEP. This is the visibility of the NAHEP is 1.5 year, and this all credit goes to you people. And today we for this very important topic. This is a trade in food, vegetable, and meat. All are perishable. The beautiful commodities trade reality aspect, not only one aspect of the marketing intelligence, like your technological innovations are very important to stitch it with. But one program is there, that is a remote sensing date for the yield prediction. So in the fruit and vegetables, if you see whether the digital signatures are available with the remote sensing people or not, because I used to attend many meetings, and one of the buyer, he was asking, can you tell me the variety wise mango plantation? So the data is there, total mango area, but variety wise was not there at the time. I don't know how people have started or not. But the thing is that that particular industrialist was interested. How can we plan, export of mango? If I know the variety, because ultimately the variety is very important. So in the trade, now I'm coming to the factors. There are the supply factor and the demand factors. So in all three, if you see the dairy, I'm little bit boring, and I'm not going to data because I know the data. You go just Google Epida, you will find how the basmati is leading. Then the non-basmati rice total is a 45,000 crore rupees, and particularly in onion, in vegetables, we are touching 2,000 crore rupees. So if you see the fruits, mango is leading one, that is a 500 crore rupees near about, and the pulp is a 500 crore. So basically why this data is important, these are the indicators to plan and where our strength is lying. That is a more important. Can we compete with the in a temperate fruit? No, because if you see the country, 80-90% area falls under the tropical and subtropical fruits. And moreover, I will tell you with my own example again. We funded the one project in NAIP when NIP was there before the NHEP for the jasmine export. That was actually great in demand because diaspora of Indians, if you see, never actually ceases. Now the flat world has given us opportunity. Being a most populated country, our presence is in every country. If you go Europe, you will find. You go US, you will find. So people have gone. The physically they have gone, but the taste bud is still they are carrying. So that is one of the crux where we have to hit. The taste bud is still they are carrying. So that is one of the crux where we have to hit. That taste bud we have to keep alive in their family so that they will demand for the Indian food. So what happened? We have funded them and the jasmine was exported because due to very less shelf life. So ultimately we funded from the ICR and the technology has actually gear up in cooling, standardization at a pre-harvest level, post-harvest level. So why I'm telling that? It is actually technology driven also. In a perishable items, technology driven things are very important. And nowadays, this data science is coming well. I was mentioning my WTO visit, and I will give only a chief guest should not give a many message. Only one or two messages I will give. One is a can be predict actually that our flow of the material and commodity. Number one. Number two, can we see that how this infrastructure is very important in perishable items. When I was asked for the chief guest, I was thinking and visualizing all three commodities, and I have seen particularly milk. If you see the internal trade and we say this outside trade, so we have seen that this infrastructure has played a very, vital role because these cooperatives have reached up to the villages. Can be think, can be plan in such a way where this Atmanirbhar Bharat, if you see, the Prime Minister has given 1 lakh crore rupees for this agri infrastructure. So agri infrastructure, particularly cold storage, cold chain, many schemes have come up and chat label and black label can be measure all these things, because that is very important. Then only you can compete in the world trade. Now, I was talking about the supply side, that's a climate, location, technology, and factor endowment and infrastructure that I have dealt. Main cities, fruit and vegetable shops, hardly 2 or 3, and those were famous. You go and you will find there. Hello, hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you are
Uh,
audible, sir.
okay.
You please
So
continue.
actually, I was talking about the demand side factor. These are the technical glitches. We will come over of that also. So it is a 5 to 6 month phenomena, and we have done good in this also. So if you see at a world level, you will find 3 places. One is the EU, that is the economic European Union. Then you will find the NAFTA, that is your American region, that is a North American free trade countries, and the another one is Asian countries, and all are having their own demand. Now you have to, in your paper, I have seen you people have published a very good book, 200 pages of book, the fruit and vegetable export, growth opportunity and challenges. So it is covering up to 2015 and 16 change, and as a agriculturist relation, I will discuss it with 1 or 2 points. So if you see that market particularly, so EU is a preferential actually approach is there. Mostly if you will find EU market is very volatile, and they are having to play, fruits and vegetable to the other European countries. The moment they think that is something is coming out from the other side, so what they actually do, they impose something like your MRL. So what we can do now, how we can tackle with the trade barriers, how we can assure stable supply, and is another important thing with the India and other developing countries, stability in the supply. I joined one meeting of a very high level in Dehradun when I was in Pannagar. At that time, the then Chief Minister visited Dubai. That was a very interesting story. Here it is related to your this particular topic. So what happened? Actually, there was hue and cry, and I think if I correctly remembering, that was a Al Barkat group. That is, I think, the biggest group lying in the Dubai for the all FMCs, and particularly for the cool chain management. So Chief Minister visited. It was a very appreciated there, and they signed the agreement. Now the Uttarakhand will provide exotic vegetables to the Dubai, and everything happened. There was a good news. Paper was full coverage was there. So we were called as a horticulturist at that time. So the main problem came with the stability of the supply, because when I started reading that class, the quality assurance and the stability of supply, otherwise there was a penalty clause. So once we invited the entrepreneur, they actually failed to come at that particular level. So that is one of the important, and why this stability is not lying, because we are not having the resilient system of production and storage. That is the crux of the trade. Until unless you are not having the, cannot negotiate, you cannot sign agreement to the outside vendors, because that stability of supply is very important. Another one story I will tell you of the McDonald opens with the lettuce, and friend, he is looking after Asia Pacific region in a McDonald. He asked me, Doctor, why not to empower your farmers in a lettuce production? I asked, why not? We are having Tarai, we are having different altitude. Can we go for the lettuce production? Then he asked, they'll get money, 2 lakh, 3 lakh per acre. But thing is that there is again a penalty clause. Because I said in the beginning, McDonald opens with the lettuce and closes with the lettuce. So lettuce they need in any way, and their risk mitigation is that if I am agreeing with their agreement and fail to supply immediately, I mean lying, if it is a matter of delay, immediately that material will come, and whatever differences were there, that will be borne from the person who committed. Even if the southern people have failed, it will come from China. He showed all the risk mitigation. Bear that non-closing of the McDonald's stores. So why again this two story is my personal experience. So we have to think about the resilience production system and the storage. So that the continuous supply, stability of the supply is very important. Then if you talk about the NAFTA, NAFTA actually this is a market, and it's an economy driven market. So it that there it is a depend upon the price and quality. So again, the very basic triangle of the product comes. It should be in quantity, it should be in good quality, and the lower the prices. That is a triangle of the export. When we were in the our PhD, that triangle we remembered when WTO was in, as a buzzword. So we thought that how to remember all these things. So 3 words actually came, we narrowed down during the PhD time. And today, if you see, those 3 words are only prevailing in the trade. That if you are having not a quantity, that stability will happen, your negotiation power will be less, you cannot penetrate in the market, and the quality, that is very important in EU market, in NAFTA market. Even the third very sun rising market for India is Japan, where the people are after the quality. Again, I will give you example. My core specialization is floriculture. So when we were preparing, doing work for the export of floriculture, so we come to know the Japanese need a bigger bud than the European market. Some color preferences are there. Packaging, visual appearance, means the visual weight. That is another one, landscape or artistic words. That is a visual weight. So how you are increasing the visual weight to your commodity? By finishing it, so that you can attract people. So that is one of the important aspect. So it is a totality. If you see the trade is not simply the produce is there, you can sell. Origin of the product should be decided with the market. Then only you can compete. The another one is in Asia, if you see, the China aggressively came. Why I was telling about, it is not about only the product quality and the prices. Now, if you talk about the policies at an international level, what type of advocacies we are having? When you has imposed that MRL in our basmati, and that to 100 times less tricyclazole, and earlier it was going on, then immediately how can you have that equipment? Have we been able to educate ourselves? The population of 130 crores, like a continent, have we developed any paper, any clinical trial, any we have visioned it? Someday it is going to come as a trade barrier. How many advocates are there in every embassy? How many agricultural ambassadors are there? Another very important thing now I will tell you, how the world is sensitive towards the environment. That is one of the crux now we have to find out in trade. If you see the water guzzler crops, water guzzler commodities, like your meat, 15, 1000 liter water required in 1 kg. In rice, it's near about 4000 liter. If you see the fruit and vegetables, you will find it's varying from 100 to 200, 1000 to 2000. Somewhere it is less. Can we go for water indexing? Can we put that type of label? Today we are talking about the carbon neutrality. We are talking about the Millennium Development Goals. Many issues are there, can be highlighted in our product. Can we utilize those technologies which are available? One of the important things I'm mentioning with my own experience here in the Sonipat, one farmer is there. So he used to produce baby cart, and later on he converted in a production of the tomato, and he was thinking that how to go for the international trade. So that guy has contacted actually Delmont, and Delmont has asked him, you go for such infrastructure, your processing line should be like this. My engineers will be there, and good agricultural practices you have to adopt. Now in every season, those people are landing in Sonipat, the Delmont people, quality control engineers, and they are camping there and they are purchasing it. So another one area that has given me another one thought, why not, rather than directly approaching to them, those companies which are having already their mark in a customer's mind as a good brand in US or in Europe or in Japan, can we make them partner? Can we make them partner here in India? In US, one firm asked by the customers, why not to supply the vegetables year round? So if you see how that person actually visited other countries, because we are in the southern hemisphere and others are in the northern hemispheres, that is a locational advantage to us. And if you see the winter, particularly in Europe, you will find at that time, nothing is coming out. Only the stored food they have to take at that time. That is the advantage lying with India to supply year round. So those companies can be contacted, and whatever good agriculture practices they are adopting, the technology, leveraging over technology is a need of our. Why not to have 10 acre, 20 acre, 50 acres of the farm, virtual farm? Those company can own it, and we can outsource good practices, and ultimately they will brand it. Only we have to give the logistic. Market things will be taken care, rather than investing a lot in the to establish the brand. Those who have established already brand there. So now another thing I was talking about, that is a price. If in EU, Spain and Netherlands are actually leading, can we have the data, how much cost is there, what quality is there, and we can hit with the product or time. So that we have to see. Every time we cannot actually compete with the product, but with the time we can compete, as I said that example. So that is now, if you see, it is now geographical proximity and trading both are becoming very important drivers. And if you say, is very important, that we have to add. Somewhere he was asking, can we have a prevalent fruit? You people are there, you are at least not at a world level. At a India level, we can find out where the surplus lying, and the potential mapping we can do once the surplus is identified. what potential is there after the technological intervention, policy interventions, so that can produce, can travel to the deficit zone, that trade may be neat, and we can predict better trading at a national level. And once you are having that particular data, so what trade map he was talking about, that appealed me. Without knowing the word trade map, how can we plan here sitting in Delhi or sitting in, Ahmedabad? So that is a very much important you think on that line. And multilateral trade agreement, that is also we have to discuss in our this particular trade of fruit, vegetable and dairy product. Then harmonization of sanitary and phytosanitary regulations. What I talked in the beginning with the few examples of my own experience, that you have to give a better heading to this. And dispute settlement under WTO. We can be find out since the establishment of WTO by the literature mining, what type of dispute took place and what prompted to those disputes, whether it was a quality related, whether it was a policy related, whether it was a country to country geopolitical, driven one. Can we think over that, and then we can come up with the very comprehensive, comprehensive policy, that resilience policy for the trade of vegetable, fruit and dairy. And anti-dumping rules, that is another one of the very important aspect. Once now I am talking about the virtual farm. Once that particular thought has come up at a world level, nobody can say that it is my cost of production is this and my cost of production is this. If the honesty will come in the trade, anti-dumping rules will vanish. So that technology can give that edge, and over that we have to leverage. So standards, that is a quality specification, then size, labeling, packaging and presentation. I talk about the visual weight. And I think I have taken good time. And in the last, India is having that behavior of the trade. Only we have to give enabling environment to see that behavior already lying. That is epigenetics. Basically, in epigenetics, generation after generation, you are processing that particular, character. So that is one of the important science people are dealing with nowadays. And if you see the Krisi Gauracham, Vadijam Vaisya Karma Swabhavam. In Gita, already Lord Krishna says, Krisi Gauracham Vadijam. 3 words were there. So this particular webinar, I wish can see this particular Krisi Gauracham, that is a dairy product. Already you are talking about. Krisi, you are talking about the fruit and vegetable. And Vadijam, you are talking about your trade. So basically, these 3 we had since time immemorial. So maritime trade, I'm not going into detail this topic. Actually, for the house, actually, I have been a civil servant, so I read lot of literature, so I can speak hours together. But okay, I think I have given 3-4 messages. Actually, I thought in the beginning, chief guest should not give more than 20 messages, so the organizing secretary will become in a tough situation in on which topic he or she should dwell. So I think I have been honest to convey 4-5 messages. And once again, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share my maulik thought, जिसको कहते हैं मौलिक विचार, that is a basic thought, whatever I have gathered in my journey as a student, as a faculty, and now as a research manager. Recently visited, God has given opportunity to visit Europe. So I visited WTO also, and we asked many questions on the trade. So I tried to convey that all this my experience in an encapsulated form, and I wish from my core of heart a great success to this particular webinar. and particularly success lying in the satisfaction of the participants. And I hope that this particular center is having, I have seen the past that book I mentioned, they have done a good job in this particular topic. And I hope that with the changes, because they're dynamic in nature, so they will incorporate whatever is left there, that they will, by analysis, they will come up. And those who are attending today, the participants, will be immensely benefited. And if they think something, they can put in chat box, so that then can become a frequently asked question on this particular topic. So I request the participant to ask as many as questions are there. So the learning actually should be coupled with the question. That is a sign of inquisitive and fertile mind. So I hope that they will put up and FAQs will come, and a good policy paper maybe may come from all such type of deliberations, so that we are talking about scalability and repeatability in this particular cost project. Because this 20 crore investment, I know for such a country, I'm not going to change, but whatever will come in the general in nature. So translational essence, if we are processing in our any literature or any experiment, then that can be translated and handholded by the government of India. With these words, once again, thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share my thought and wish a great success one day webinar on this particular topic, which is a very pertinent in today's context. Thank you once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your insights about trade barriers and other barriers in the export of horticultural products, with examples and emphasizing the importance of technology and highlighting the need of the hour with respect to the trade. You have also always been encouraging us throughout the tenure of this project to perform even better. You truly said that due to NAHEP, our university has become lively and vibrant even in this pandemic situation. Now I would like to welcome Dr. Samit Datta, Organizing Secretary and Core co-PI of this project, to deliver a vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Good morning all. Myself Samit Datta, Associate Professor and Head of Food Business Management Department. On behalf of NAHEPCA Center for Agricultural Market Intelligence of AU Anand, I take this opportunity to propose vote of thanks to those who have directly and indirectly contributed in organizing this one-day webinar on trade in fruits and vegetable products and dairy commodities. At the outset, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to our Honorable Vice Chancellor and President of this inaugural session. He was supposed to preside, but actually he got busy, so he couldn't join right now. Dr. R.V. Vyas sir for his continuing guidance and encouragement. I also thank our chief guest, Dr. Prabhat Kumar, National Coordinator, NAHEP CAST, for continuously motivating us. We are really enlightened with your thoughtful words and gracious presence, sir. We have also noted, you have mentioned many very important aspects. We have also noted that is not only important for today's seminar, but also important for our research purpose also. We convey our sincere thanks to the expert speaker of first technical session, Mr. Rajesh Chatterjee, Program Manager, Fonterra, who has joined us from New Zealand, and we are going to listen to him shortly. I'd also like to thank our advisor and principal and Dean, International Agribusiness Management Institute, Anand Agriculture University, Dr. Y.C. Jhala, and our principal investigator, Dr. R.S. Pundi, for their continuing direction and support. Thanks are also due for core co-PI capacity building, Dr. Y.A. Lad, my fellow co-PIs, Dr. A.K. Makwana, Mr. M.D. Gurjar, Ms. Vishita Khanna, and all other core co-PIs and co-PIs, all the deans and directors and office bearers of this university, who always stand by us, guide us, lead us, and motivate us. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by a team of very motivated and dedicated team of research associates and senior research fellows and other staffs. Heartfelt thanks to Sri Divyang, Vabik, Neerav, Ms. Kripali, Ayushi, Kosha, Sri Smith, and all others. Last but not the least, we convey our sincere thanks to 2,100 plus participating postgraduate students and faculties from various agriculture universities and other stakeholders of this project for showing their interest in making this program successful. In these 2,100 participants, about 500 are faculties, and there are 300 others who are not students or faculties but stakeholders. So that is also very encouraging for us. With this, now I'll hand it over to Ms. Vishita again for continuing the session.
Thank you so much, sir. Now we formally end our inaugural session and begin our first session for the webinar. For this, I would like to request Dr. Samit Datta to introduce the topic of the webinar, followed by the introduction of our first speaker. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Vishita. Um, I heartily welcome you all to the first technical session of this webinar on trade in F&B products and dairy commodities. Under this prestigious World Bank funded ICR project, this National Agricultural Higher Education Project, in the Center for Agricultural Market Intelligence, what we have establishing in AU Anand, we are working with set of objectives consisting of capacity building of postgraduate students and faculties, along with various other research objectives. One of the research objectives of this project is to study the market competitiveness of different dairy commodities. Dairy commodities means this butter oil, ghee, and milk powders. So in this session, we would like to get an international perspective of dairy commodity market. India, as we know, is self-sufficient. We are number one in milk production, but our participation in the world dairy trade is very negligible. There are different reasons for that. But in this deliberation is very important for us, not only for capacity building, also for research perspective. So to give us a detailed insight on this important topic, today we have with us Mr. Rajesh Chatterjee from Fonterra Group of New Zealand. As you know, that Fonterra Cooperative Group Limited is a New Zealand multinational dairy cooperative, which is owned by around 10,500 farmers. And the company is responsible for approximately 30% of the world's dairy export. I welcome you, Mr. Rajesh, and thank you sincerely for accepting our invitation. Mr. Rajesh Chatterjee is a dairy technologist from Bidhan Chandra Krishi Vishwavidyalaya, West Bengal, and MTech in Bioprocess Engineering from Massey University, New Zealand. He had executive education from Caltech, Pasadena, USA, and also a PMP certified project manager from PMI. He is having a vast industrial experience of over 27 years in global dairy industry. So he started working with Gokul Dairy in Kolhapur, then subsequently Schreiber Dairy, Baramati. Then he lived in New Zealand, Mexico, Germany, etc. Traveled extensively within the global dairy industry. And since last 19 years, he's working with the Fonterra in various roles like process manager, plant manager, application manager, technical manager, IP manager, technical service manager, and program manager. With this short introduction, I hand the session to Mr. Rajesh, please.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Excellent. I would like to keep pushing for the sake of time. So slow me down if I'm going too fast, right? Okay. Thanks, everyone. I consider it's a privilege to get invited to talk about something very vast topic like global dairy commodity market. I will try to take a stab and I'll try to break it down as I understand, as I have seen it in my through my experience or synthesis of all my experiences. So it is dry. It is going to be very dry. So it is heavy. I give you a statutory warning. So you may or may not enjoy everything, but stick to it. You may get something out of it. And a goal for me, they call it BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. A big, hairy, audacious goal, BHAG would be someone from the audience, at least one successful export business in food and beverage and dairy. If someone can take a step into that, I will consider my time well invested. There is nothing right or wrong. It is what I have seen through my eyes. And I'm not claiming that I know everything and whatever I say is right. No, not at all. There can be multiple ways, various ways to do the similar thing, similar outcome. So with that context, I think I'll ask one more question. Why do we need to export? Why do we need to care about global dairy market, export market? Why? I will ask a simple question. Would you get Kohli, Dhoni, Tendulkar without Indian cricket team playing international test or T20 or whatever the one-day matches? Possibly not. Unless you expose your capability to get tested and challenged by the international community, it is unlikely that you will excel in a closed market. But I understand both sides of the argument very well, why a closed market is required and at what situation one country needs to make an effort to get into export. A particular example from New Zealand is New Zealand produces, like Dr. Samit Datta mentioned, um, New Zealand produces very little compared to India, but 97% of milk from New Zealand gets exported because the population is so little, only 5 million, 50 lakhs people only in New Zealand. So that means that New Zealand is dependent on dairy export. And that means that New Zealand had to make an effort, one, to remove all the subsidies to make it a lowest cost commodity producer, and then actually compete internationally, and then continuously pushing the value addition on top of commodity. So I will talk about commodity, but I think to achieve success in commodity, you have to have a massive scale, huge scale. Like I'll give you one example, the New Zealand powder dryers, the milk dryer, milk powder dryers. In New Zealand, they have 30 ton per hour 30 ton per hour, 30,000 kgs per hour capacity. There are 4 robots continuously palletizing the bags that are coming out of 30-ton dryer. So that is a massive scale, whereby scale, they are reducing the cost of conversion. And that cost of conversion, like our opening speaker said, at a commodity market, cost and quality is very important. Without that, you do not have a business. So with that setup, I'll just go quickly through a couple of slides and then I'll stop and talk about it. If you can see the global dairy trade flow, you will notice there are 3 regions mainly that are exporting. One is Oceania, little bit from Australia, but massive amount from New Zealand. New Zealand actually taken over Australia. Australia used to be the big brother, but now is New Zealand who's dominating the world trade flow. And it is about one third of the global dairy trade, cross-border trade. So I'm not talking about milk produced and consumed within the country. Now that doesn't get recorded. Obviously, there would be data, how much a country is producing and how much is being consumed, mostly in the fresh dairy. The local consumption goes into fresh dairy perspective, right? But then when it gets to the global dairy trade, then mostly the commodities like milk powder, butter, cheese, and I'll talk about all of that. So if you minutely look at this trade flow, you will see India is not exporting a lot. India is very self-sufficient, number 1 in global milk production. However, its participation to the world dairy trade is nominal. And there are reasons, we know that, right? I'll talk about more of that as I understand. But you will note that there is a massive amount of, obviously, New Zealand doing trade, and then Europe, and a lot of it going to China, obviously, and also Middle East. Like Europe feeds into Middle East because of the closeness of the market. And then US feeding into Mexico. The Mexican data is little bit confusing because a lot of it comes to Mexico to get converted into higher value product and then gets fed back under NAFTA, that North American treaty, back into US and Canada. So it is a two-way trade between US and Mexico. I actually lived in Mexico for a while, about 2 years. And what I have seen, there are multiple factories with American flag in front of them. And all of them are American companies. But because the cost of business is lower compared to United States, particularly the health and safety and all the compliance cost and everything else, so a lot of those American companies actually go across the border and set up their factory shops in Mexico, and then feeding back into the US market. US is a massive market. US is #1 market, #1 economy. And you need to really visit and see how big and wide it is. What I call, like, you go to Middle East also a big market, but there is a lot of volume, not much value. In Europe, it is a very competitive market, particularly in fresh dairy. But in United States, you have both volume and value. It is a market that appreciates higher quality, higher value, customer value, and customer is willing to pay the price. Anyway, with that background of the global, I will quickly, it's a very busy slide. Some of my slides are very busy. I apologize for that. I didn't get much time, so I just possibly cut and paste and a whole lot of dump here. I'll try to grab your attention in some of the key messages. You look at the first top left slide that is about milk and cream. You see a big thick line going from Europe to China. Europe is literally exporting liquid milk to China, fresh dairy to China. And that is quite amazing. You have some from Australia, but a big flow from Europe. And that is mostly fresh milk and cream, right? And then the next right, top middle chart is about whey product, which is WPC, WPI, whey protein concentrate, whey protein isolates, and also whey powder and whey cheese and things like that. Some of those products are coming out of US and Europe. You don't see much getting exported out of New Zealand, and there are reasons why. Anyway, the long story is where there is a cheese market, big cheese market, that produces a lot of sweet whey. There are two types of whey, acid whey, sweet whey. Acid whey is not good. Acid whey comes from acid coagulation of milk. Sweet whey comes from cheese, rennet coagulation of milk. And that sweet whey gets into your whey protein powders and all of the WPCs and WPI, particularly value add from WPC 35 to WPI 90, right? 90% protein. That is a range of protein variants in whey protein. That's mostly coming out of Europe and US because their local production of cheese is significant. So they do have a huge volume of that whey getting generated and then ultimately captured in a whey powder or WPC or WPI, whey protein isolate form. And you see some of Europe and US coming into India, like in Indian whey protein market, bodybuilding, like top end market, it's all American protein, right? So it is kind of interesting flow. And then the next one is one of the very different picture, whole milk powder. Not a lot of country produces whole milk powder, and New Zealand is big in whole milk powder. And whole milk powder is just you are taking the milk and you are standardizing and then you are pushing it out as a milk powder. And that's China is number one market. It may be worth noting here that China gets 1/3 or sorry, 25, between 25 to 30%, it varies, of trade between dairy trade between New Zealand export. China is 25%. So about 25 to 30% of New Zealand export gets consumed by China only. And whole milk powder is one of the big mover of milk solid. They call it, it moves milk solid. Massive amount of milk solid gets captured as whole milk powder into a 25 kg bag, gets into container. Like these guys close a container, 40-feet container every 3 minutes. Every 3 minutes, there's a container getting closed and catching, that's $100,000 getting exported. So there is a significant volume of milk gets captured into WMP, and WMP hasn't got much byproduct because the fat is going and SNF is going, everything going into WMP. The next one is cheese flow. As I mentioned before, left bottom, you see the cheese actually getting exported out of Europe. Europe has got almost a very strong position in cheese, and then some from New Zealand and Australia. The next one is skim milk powder. Skim milk powder is actually a very good indicator, and that's a very standard product across the globe. And you see, again, participation export from US to Mexico, which I explained before, under NAFTA, And then you see from Europe, it's going into mostly everywhere, Middle East and Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is a big consumer of skim milk powder. And you see from New Zealand as well, going to China and Southeast Asia, right? And little bit mixed Middle East, but not too much. Middle East takes whole milk powder. And then butter and butter oil trade flow. So that's self-explanatory. So what are the key messages here? The key message here, these are the top traded product. Fresh dairy, it is a very difficult product. There are UHT lines, obviously, that's fresh dairy. But fresh dairy requires a very efficient and fast supply chain. If your supply chain is not fast, do not go into fresh dairy, because it will get stuck in the port and the bioclock. We know milk dairy is a very live product, right? It has a bioclock. So fresh dairy, if you go through the port, some of the things are not under your control, you will be praying, right? You will be left praying, nothing else you can do. While the powders and the cheese, okay, cheese and butter goes under refrigerated, and all powders are ambient. So base is ambient. Refrigerated is costly, double or triple the cost of the supply chain, but still manageable. But base is the ambient, where the powders are. And that's why you see New Zealand at the end of the world, a tiny little country that's exporting most of its powder to the rest of the world, because powder has got a 2 to 3 years shelf life, right? So it's a long way from the main markets, but it is punching above its weight. So for the global dairy commodity export goes. Right. Feel free to stop me if you have specific questions on slides. I don't want a monologue. I want a dialogue, right? So feel free, stop me questions. So key messages here.
Excuse me. What we'll do actually, we'll take questions from YouTube chat box also at the end of the session. So you can go. Okay.
Okay, no problem. So again, the key message is New Zealand doing mostly powder, milk, fresh dairy from Europe, and lots of whey product from US. And these are the flow. And Middle East is a taker, mostly from number 1 from Europe, number 2 from New Zealand. Australia have gone down. Australia used to be the big brother, but with the, you call it a climate change or whatever, their temperature is growing, and grass and all of those, Australia dairy industry is in trouble. While New Zealand is warming up, and New Zealand is fantastic climate for dairy. Moving on. Okay, you all know about some of these numbers. India is the number 1 milk producer. Obviously, EU 27 countries combined produces more than India, but on a country basis, country to country level, India is the number 1. So it is a bit of quandary, question mark, that India being number 1 milk producer has very little participation in export. So that is one of the questions that I think the administration or the government needs to answer. It's a long-term policy, what they want to do, whether they want to participate in the global market or they're happy with being a closed market. And arguments in both ways. And we'll touch through all of those points as I skip through the slides. But this slide just gives you a perspective where the global milk productions are basically, and what are the producing country, exporting countries, and what are the consuming countries, importing countries. Africa, Middle East Africa is a big importer. Most of their milk is actually imported. Latin America, again, a bit of fresh dairy market and analog market. I'll talk about analog. Analog is a cost focused solution, meaning the dairy fat is getting skimmed, taken out, and vegetable oil is getting in the formula. That's called analog. And that's where they reduce their cost of production or price. So Latin America is big in analog. Middle East also is big in analog. Like a lot of those processed cheese they manufacture that don't have milk fat, that have actually vegetable oil. So things like that. And then obviously in India, dairy whitener is an analog, replacing lactose with sugar. So things like that. And these are available, but these are mostly in the developing countries. In developed countries, you do not get much analog. Analog actually increases the volume without necessarily increasing the milk solid consumption, if you get my drift. So that is the slide. Moving on. The opening, the chief guest actually talked about WTO. And it's fascinating to hear from him his experience and his takes when he visited WTO. WTO is something really big for the global trade. And I was going to mention, I was hearing China has got 2,000 people sitting in WTO, just going through the documents and rules and regulations, understanding all the nooks and crannies of WTO rules to actually penetrate trade into different parts of the world. Unless you are investing, unless you know the rule of the game, it's very difficult to win the game. If we have to win, right? Not necessarily you have to play the game, but China has decided to get into global trade, massive push, and Chinese have really invested, and they have massive amount of people just crawling through data of global trade, understanding each arbitrage, different opportunities, and then actually pushing up the value chain and pushing trade globally. So what is WTO? WTO, we know, World Trade Organization. What they do is they actually set the rules of the game, or arbitration. Any conflict between the countries get escalated into WTO. And they have come up with some very good systems. Actually, before that, it was very difficult. Like, you don't know when you export to a border, you don't know whether the customs will allow your goods to get into that country. After WTO, after this HS code, harmonized systems, tariff code, and each country has had to clearly articulate what is their tariff and duty for each of those HS code of the different materials. And it is really a minefield. When you go to the details of each product and then sub-classification and everything, it requires some expertise or time for you to understand all the variations and different possibilities. You can create a formulation to actually ditch tariff. Like, I'll give you a simple example. 1% salt with ghee, right? For US, there was a clause where Kraft actually discovered that if they are throwing salt into ghee, they're getting zero tariff. Then they partnered with Fonterra, and then for 15 long years, they have done AMF, anhydrous milk fat import into US with 1% salt. Salt doesn't add or doesn't mix into ghee. Salt sits at the bottom, and they take the ghee or AMF, anhydrous milk fat, from the top, right? So salt is sitting at the bottom, but it has 1% salt. That means it qualified for a zero tariff HS code. And these are the things called tariff buster. And these tariff busters are everywhere if you crawl through the WTO and all of these HS codes, and by each country, what is the tariff and duty for that code. And then quota. Lots of countries have got quota associated with that code. So up to this quota, it may be free or low duty. Beyond this quota, maybe higher duty, right? So they're trying to balance, obviously, the domestic market and the international market, how much they allow into their country. So it is really a minefield, devils in the details, and people are crawling through all of these HS codes and country-specific duty, tariff quota, how much quota available, and then applying for quota or accessing quota, who has got quota, giving them fees, and then importing under this quota, right? Quota system. So just an example, here is a butter HS code, and then you see the butter and the dairy spread, and then the other butter, oil, ghee, and all of those. But then comes the FTA, where a country defines either bilateral or in a group free trade agreement. They define, sometimes they start with very high duty, and then over 5 to 10 years, the duty goes down. And they define by each item, each subcode, they will define the duty. So when they join a free trade agreement, I'll try to give some examples. So that is the message. Mostly it is used in the customs. Every country border has got customs, whether sea freight or air freight. They will go through customs. Customs will have to approve your shipment, and you have to declare, this is my HS code that I'm exporting into. And the importer also work together, exporter and importer. And HS code is important. Moving on. Very busy slide. I don't want to talk to everything. Couple of key messages. Again, I talked about the tariff and quota system. There are lots of quota available around the world, and each country is bilateral or trilateral. Like NAFTA is a trilateral FTA, free trade agreement, between Canada, US, and Mexico. Mostly bilateral. There are a lot of country to country, like India is trying to get a bilateral with USA at the moment, and then Europe, multilateral, and then a group of countries like ASEAN. ASEAN is a very interesting, where India is a party to ASEAN. So I have a couple of slides. I will explain ASEAN trade, how that is happening. But New Zealand is a very pro-trade country, and it is open border. So to be pro-trade, you have to first open your border. Anybody can come in. You cannot stop anyone. And that is a dangerous proposition. So you have to understand both sides of the impact and modeling. There are a lot of economic modeling they do. If I open up my border, what may happen, right? How much may come in? Would that crash my domestic pricing? Thereby, all the suppliers will get paid less, which is a valid argument until you are competitive. So essentially what I'm saying here, to play in the global export trade market, you really have to tighten up, sharpen up your belt, and you have to be top notch, whatever you are doing. Otherwise, it's a deadly game, and they will come in, they will destroy your market. And that happened in many markets, many product segments, where the participant is not ready to open the border, and then suddenly open the border without realizing what will happen. And in 5-10 years, it destroys the whole segment. And there are examples available mostly from Africa that they opened up without realizing what they're doing. So it is a very dangerous territory, treacherous territory to step into. So without understanding your core competitiveness, how you will be competitive, and then how much you want to participate and how much you want to play. Like China has gone all out. There is no duty, no tariff quota, nothing. Japan has got quota. So Japan is managing through quotas. This is the first tier quota. Then with this duty, then you exceed it, second tier quota, third tier quota. So Japan is managing import through quota system mostly. And that's very interesting how they have designed their quota. And US has got preferential quota. Some countries it gives free, zero tariff, unlimited import. Some countries it gives limited quota with lower tariff, MFN rate, most favored nation rate, and then some countries no quota, full rate, full tariff, right? So it is very interesting to actually understand your target market, which market you are trying to penetrate, and then go deep inside their WTO. They have to declare, to sign into WTO, they have to declare which item from which country, what quota, what duty. So everything is available in internet. Mostly US is number one, but as Google and internet getting mature, you get a lot of data to deep into. And I'll tell you some of the way to do all of those research as well. Okay, moving on. I think here is an example of Indian perspective, how ASEAN trade is going with India. As you can see in the graph, the red is import and the blue is export. So it was going very highly neck to neck until 2012. And then it started drifting off, and then again bounced back in 2017, again drifting off. So this is something that the export and finance ministry and all of those industrial divisions are watching these numbers, because you cannot suddenly enter into an open trade, free trade, and lose because you are importing more, you are not exporting. So balance of trade is very important, and these numbers are absolutely makes or breaks a country at a GDP level, right? At a financial level, at a segment, at a category level. So dairy industry, if we join, what is the implication? Or fisheries, or vegetable, or whatever, the rice and everything else. So each of these segment has got their own modeling, and when they join, they do some of the modeling, and then they track against that model whether their balance of payment or the trade balance is as predicted, or we are losing, right? So here looks like India is not exporting as much to ASEAN as ASEAN is exporting to India. And India needs to earn foreign currency as well, right? India needs to export. Unless you are exporting, the demand, obviously, you go through the swings of price. Sometimes price goes through the roof. Sometimes you have oversupply, price crashes. And that is because you're not managing your supply demand curve, right? And one of the best way to actually open up is have a stable demand where the industry is getting efficient, competitive, it is exposed to the export market, and it is bringing dollars from its export. Ideal, easier said than done. There are a lot of homework, and particularly this community, the scientific and academic community, can add a lot to the industry. So again, key messages here. You will see RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Some of you may have heard that. This was in the news in December. And India was this close, very, very close to join the 16 countries RCEP. Regional partnership, and then India pulled out because one, China, two, New Zealand dairy, and India didn't like some of those things. Obviously, there are a lot of people advising the ministry, Trade and Commerce Ministry, to whether to sign in or not to. It was a big 16 countries RCEP, 10 ASEAN, and then other three, China, Japan, Korea, and other three from here, India, Australia, and New Zealand, going into ASEAN. I'll talk about that ASEAN a little more. It is a very interesting case study. If anyone wants to know more what happened, look at from 2001 and where we are, and you will understand segment by segment analysis. Numbers are available. What HS code are getting exported and imported, and at what pricing. So you will get a lot of academic research input if you simply study ASEAN FTA. And that's a very good model, actually. Moving on, I'll give an example. But anyway, the key headline statement is New Zealand has got no access, no preferential access, nothing into Indian market. So New Zealand is at zero. New Zealand is trying heavily to get access to Indian market, but New Zealand is not very attractive to India at all. New Zealand is tiny. It is flooded with dairy. It can actually dump a lot of dairy into India. So it's pretty high risk as considered by the Indian dairy industry, and possibly true. So I would be very careful to get into trade with New Zealand without securing the balance of payment. Like what else? Like maybe the IT services. It's actually very big. New Zealand IT services is dominated by Indian companies. All the Indian IT companies, HCL and everyone, like Fonterra, big 30, 50 million contract. The whole Fonterra 22,000 people IT system is managed by HCL. And there are hundreds of engineers part here in the head office, and they are just managing Fonterra's IT system. Just one example of many companies. So IT services is big, massive. India earns a lot of export dollars from IT services. It doesn't have to be goods. It can be services also. And then intellectual property and how you handle all of those. Anyway, long story short, I think the Indian market is highly protected. And you can see some of the tariff. Tariff is very, very high, 60% for skim milk powder, whole milk powder, 60%. So again, the key message here is the tariff is added onto the landed cost at the port, CIF value, and then there are some cess also, education cess, or sometimes COVID cess, or whatever government decides, 2-3% cess on import. So all of those, see, education says 3%, special duty, you know. So all of those different things keep adding on top, and it makes business unviable. Basically, the importer can't, the price, landed price, DDP, like delivered duty paid price, goes much higher than the domestic price. So it is not a viable business. And that is a very interesting way. It is a direct restriction to access the market. It is a very direct, blunt instrument to put a duty. Nobody likes it, but that's a very widely used, number one. And then the next one is quota. Yes, I'm open to a certain volume. And then have tiered duty, like this much volume, zero duty, next volume, 5%, 10%, 20%. So basically, the countries are managing through the quota volume associating with preferential rate. And then they need to apply, all the companies, the domestic companies, the importer have to apply for the quota. And then once they get quota, they can import against the quota. That is the next layer of control. Moving on. ASEAN again. ASEAN is a very interesting study. I have another slide. I'll talk about it. I'm sure some of you know or have done research or doing research on ASEAN trade. And this is where India has got some preferential access to different countries and different, you see that yellow are trade agreement under negotiation. So India, obviously US is also yellow. India is actively negotiating trade agreement, free trade agreement with Europe, US and Australia. India has changed focus from RCEP. Like India has got ASEAN, the 10 countries already, it is party to ASEAN. And I will talk more about next slide, how the ASEAN gets all of those quota and access duty for India. So India have signed up to ASEAN. ASEAN is the 10 countries in Southeast Asia, and they have gone all out. They have opened their border between those 10 countries, and they are continuously opening and bringing more partners. Like the RCEP is 16 countries, meaning ASEAN is 10, the next lot is 16. Now, without India, it will be 15 countries if India doesn't join. I think they are ratifying, all their parliaments are ratifying those free trade agreement. So it is an interesting dynamics of global trade. And here are all the complexities. You may not necessarily need it, or you may not appreciate it. I will quickly touch base. What they do is now say the ASEAN countries, 10 countries that mostly have, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, all of those, they have free trade agreement bilateral with many other countries. Like New Zealand has got a free trade agreement with ASEAN. Does it mean that I can export to ASEAN and then ASEAN has got trade agreement with India, that means I can go to India via ASEAN? No, there is a clause, it's called RVC, regional value component, right? So you have to have 35% of the landed value made within that ASEAN. That means if the landed cost to Indian port is 100, New Zealand can only give 65. Rest 35% of the cost must be origin. Country of origin is important in trade. So rest 35% must be coming from ASEAN. It can be labor cost, it can be packaging material cost, it will be conversion cost and losses, handling losses, everything. But on 100 rupees or dollar at Indian port, Indian border, 35 must come from ASEAN and 65. So that means I cannot simply change the bag or even pack from bulk to consumer pack and then push it into India. No. And there are requirements like the sixth digit, the HS code that you have seen, the last 2 digit must change. That means unless it's a significant operation, unlikely it will qualify for the pass-through benefit. It is called pass-through benefit. I'm from New Zealand, I'm pushing to ASEAN, from ASEAN, I'm pushing into India. I'm trying to get a pass-through benefit. Unless it's a significant operation, meaning boiling butter to make ghee, that's a significant operation. And the fifth and sixth digit of the HTS code changes, that is a tick. And then 35% of the value coming from ASEAN. So the value addition has to be from the country of origin that is in trade agreement. So hopefully that is somewhat clear. And then there are a lot of people who are trying to create, like, say for an example, ghee is going into sweet meat industry, right? And they add sugar. So can you add 60% ghee and 40% sugar, like liquid sugar, like sugar liquid, and then you just mix it? It won't be homogeneous mixture. Who cares? In your final drum or like bulk pack, you have 40% sugar syrup and 60% ghee. If you can do that, then you get the benefit of this 35% regional value add. You are buying sugar from, say, Malaysia or Indonesia, and then you have to look at the value component, like ghee being high price and sugar being low price. The volume won't be at that same ratio. It is the value ratio, 35-65. And then also foreign exchange changes and all of those. So it is recommended you go 40 plus, 40-60, right? Do this value split. And then you create a tariff buster. And then you can go into India or any other country. So the examples that I'm giving, don't get me only applicable for India. It is applicable globally if you can find a tariff buster. And a lot of these companies, like I told you, the China, 2,000 people are sitting in WTO, just doing all of these things, looking at the how to play the game within the rules, but finding a whole loop allowable, white hat allowable exceptions that exist, and it exists globally everywhere. It is about being smart, how you play, and then creating those formulation to actually get the preferential access or tariff, lower tariff. Okay, I think I've spoken enough. So moving on, the next level, like I talked about tariff, I talked about quota. The next barrier is phytosanitary. What is a phytosanitary barrier? Phytosanitary barrier is very interesting. It brings some religious, some microbiological, some other parameters into the mix. Like like I have given an example here. India has, like, here is a health certificate. I'll talk about health certificate more. But India has got a requirement. You cannot have animal origin rennet in cheese. Animal origin like calf rennet, right? India will not allow calf rennet used, rennet casein or cheese. Simple as that. Because India doesn't like calf rennet. Simple. So you are allowed to create your own phytosanitary barriers. And India at the receiving end also gets a lot of slack, or lot of, sorry, not slack, lot of heat from different markets on phytosanitary standards. India has still is a foot and mouth disease positive country, and a lot of countries actually have that requirement. It has to come from foot and mouth free country. Like New Zealand is a foot and mouth free country. India, I think, is in the middle. It is trying to, it has an action plan to get rid of the foot and mouth disease, but it is still can be present. And so you have to go through a special approval. It is not a foot and mouth free country, not declared. And that actually a significant phytosanitary barrier for India to export, particularly in dairy. So what is a health certificate? Health certificate is actually issued by government. And you go around the world and different countries have different standards and how they issue health certificate. In New Zealand, it is highly traceable from farm through to truck tanker, through to milk processing plant, through even a transporter into a storage, storage of say powder storage or cheese storage. And then basically it tracks through the electronic document, through the shipment. So the material flows and the document flows alongside. And that is very interesting dynamic. So you cannot take out, you cannot add unscrupulous things, because your mass balance, all the inputs are tracked into the final formulation and final product. So it is a highly traceable system in New Zealand. They have created an electronic document thing. So every time a material is moving, there is a document moving with that particular goods. And each of those control points, say it's a factory, say it's a warehouse, say it's a truck or tanker, they are under different quality systems. Here in New Zealand, they call it RMP, Risk Management Program. So when it is under risk management program, there is an audit and control procedure around that. So if a factory has got that approval, then obviously the factory is getting audited, highly regulated, and any non-compliance monitored. Even a storage warehouse, they have their risk management program, pest control or whatever it may be, and they are getting audited. So when the document is moving through the system, all of these units are individually getting audited, and they are managing their risk, food safety risk or other chemical contaminants or whatever the risk are. Risk is ambient, risk is anything, right? So that you cannot transport even a chemical in a truck, you cannot transport a food and chemical together. You can't, because there is a contamination risk. So it is highly regimented and highly controlled by New Zealand government, and the range of auditors and systems, that everyone has to live up to that standard for the document to flow, for the material to flow. And then once the material goes into a ship for sailing, it issues a health certificate. Then government is actually seeing, okay, the milk came from this farm is audited by this guy, then it came to this factory, it is audited, then it went to this warehouse, it is audited, in the truck, it is under that warehouse control plan, and then into the port and final. So all of those individual units, processing units, are under the regime of that overall the food safety or whatever. So it is quite regimented system. But I have seen in India, it is not necessarily linked. Like the health certificate is issued by government. I don't know how they manage to get it. They don't necessarily flow through the supply chain of the product, or the plant may have certification, but the warehouse may not have, or the transport may not have, or the farm may or may not have any system. So I think there is a massive opportunity, and this gives a lot of confidence for a country to go to another country saying, this is how we manage our supply chain, this is how we manage our contamination risk, food safety risk and all of those. So that gives a lot of confidence. Like I can tell you, a New Zealand health certificate gets a red like carpet entry, like no barrier anywhere it goes, the product goes. And that gives a lot of peace in exporter mind that my container will not get stuck in a port. It's a big money. If I don't get the money, then obviously it's a risk to the importer, risk to the exporter, and these risks are mitigated through some of the systems, and health certificate is one of those. I think I have spoken enough. And there are, like, India banned China food milk solids because there was a melamine scare. I'll talk about the melamine scare later, but in India also banned. So these are phytosanitary barriers. These are not tariff, these are not quota, these are phytosanitary. Okay, again, details of that online system. I picked up a health certificate template for India. You can see importing country India, and you will see the conditions, and must be for fit for human consumption, have been processed to a temperature that ensures the destruction of organism causing tuberculosis, listeria, pre-tuberculosis, or paratuberculosis, or whatever. And then do not contain drug or pesticides or heavy metals, and do not contain preformed bacterial toxin levels such as produced by the bacteria Staphylococcus aureus, Bacillus cereus. So it has not been manufactured using animal rennet. Look at the middle point above the white, has not been manufactured using animal point. So if my product has got animal rennet, I won't get this health certificate from New Zealand government, and that this product won't be allowed in Indian customs. So what New Zealand has done, and this is fabulous, and it is not even in US or anywhere. I think Europe has got similar system. What New Zealand has done, New Zealand has negotiated with each of the customs, like Indian customs and New Zealand customs. They sat together, they agreed on the parameters, what India will allow and what India will not allow. So then they have documented everything and they have created template. So if I am to export for human consumption a dairy to India, I pick up that template, importing country India, and immediately it gives all the conditions that are signed off and approved by the MOU or whatever, these two country agreements that they have agreed. This is fantastic. So it reduces the exporter risk of customs not agreeing to allow. Hey, you have agreed, you have signed up, you asked for all of these conditions, I'm meeting all these conditions, why would you stop my product in the border? They can't. And this is what they have done online. So for every country, they have created a thing called OMAR, Overseas Market Entry Requirement. Each country, each product has got different entry requirements. And they have captured it into a database. Then they have created a electronic document system that everybody complies, and they'll ultimately, when they get the health certificate, that health certificate is particularly satisfied to that particular country, to the customs of that country. And they see all the conditions, they know that these are the conditions they have agreed with New Zealand, and fantastic. It moves through the border to the absolute red carpet. There is no stoppage whatsoever. And this gives a lot of confidence to the importer and exporter, because export is very costly. You're looking at $100,000 per container, depending on what commodity or what, but dairy is very, very costly. Okay, I think I have made my point. Moving on. Then you move to some different certifications. Some of them are marketing, what I called customer connect, customer values, and customer value those certifications, and some are religious, some of the just regulatory confidence, right? So you get USDA organic, that is very well known, and if you can get that certification, there is a massive market available to your product. Then non-GMO, or some of the religious like halal and kosher for Jewish community, halal is for Muslim community. And there are authorities and bodies that actually approve, come to the factory, they will go through the supply chain, they will go through the document, and they will approve. And HACCP, hazard analysis, critical control point, by different laboratory or the auditors like SGS and all of them. So these certificates are important to do export business. These are very important. And attached to the certificate is a size of pie, meaning a customer segment. If you have halal, you got an instant customer recognition in the Muslim countries. You got USDA, organic, you got an instant recognition of your product if you can achieve that. So these are very important levers for export. Moving on. Okay, this lot of data. I don't know whether you can see all of those, but what I'm trying to say here is the global market converges. If you look at the top left slide, there's the skim milk powder US, skim milk powder Netherlands, skim milk powder UK, skim milk powder GDT, global dairy trade. I will talk about global dairy trade later. And that is a trading auction platform that New Zealand has got, right? So all of these are price trained. As the price moves through the years and years, and you can see for last 10 years how these different global markets have followed a particular track of pricing. But then as you look deeper, there is difference. And these are called arbitrage. Arbitrage is whether replaceable product, same quality, commodities are meant to be same quality, replaceable. So you can replace a skim milk powder from Europe with skim milk powder from US, with a skim milk powder from New Zealand, and to some extent skim milk powder from India as well, right? So some of these commodities are replaceable. And then the price converges, right? And then even within that, there is a local and global supply demand, and that creates arbitrage. And these arbitrage opportunities are taken up by big global sellers and traders. Some of the company that are doing business, obviously Fonterra, exporting 97% of New Zealand product, dairy product, very dependent on this arbitrage. They are everyone is trying to push their price up within that arbitrage limit. And as you can see, some of those quotations, 3 months out, 6 months out, there is an expectation that the price will be at that level. So, and that is based on supply, demand, and everything else, right? So with the COVID, there was not a lot of dip in the dairy consumption. New Zealand kept on going. So there was no dip in New Zealand export revenue through COVID. So that was interesting to watch. Anyway, these are base commodity like AMF, anhydrous milk fat, buttermilk powder, butter, cheddar cheese, lactose, skim milk powder, whole milk powder. These are the prices now in 3 months' time, in 6 months' time. These forecasting tools are available, and the big companies and traders are looking there. Both like Fonterra exporting $22 billion or whatever that they're exporting, and then others are importing like Nestle, Danone. They're buying big volume from Fonterra. Nestle doesn't produce that much milk powder or whatever. And Abbott, Friesland, Campina, Lactalis, all of those, they're buying, and then they're converting that milk solid into consumer products in different markets. And that is, they are constantly watching their procurement cost, what those ingredient costs are. And they are modeling their pricing and profitability based on that. They cannot suddenly change the supermarket price. They cannot suddenly change the distributor retailer margin. So they are constantly watching what is my landed cost. And then they also look for substitute. They look for, okay, if Europe price is going up, do I get cheaper price from India or Mercosur, meaning Latin America? So they're constantly arbitraging between the different origin of product. Okay. This is the global dairy trade. If you Google, if you are interested, do Google global dairy trade. You will get, this is owned by Fonterra in New Zealand, and this has changed the game. Previous to this, I think this is going on for over last 10 years. Previous to this, I think 15 years. Previous to this, it was hush, someone negotiating price 1-to-1. And here what they have done, it's a price discovery tool. There is a about 600, 650 customers, big houses like Nestle or Arla is a supplier. So say Almarai in Middle East is a big company, dairy company. They are buying, or China, massive amount of, as you have seen in the first couple of slides, that all of those are following this global dairy trade pricing. And the global price is being set against these auctions. These are auction. There is another, obviously there are other auctions like from CME, Chicago Mercantile Exchange is a massive auction house. They auction like sugar, palm oil, all the commodities is getting auctioned there on a daily basis. And dairy gets auctioned fortnightly. And then Europe has got auction. India has started an auction between the co-ops, all of those, but not very much to the global importers. So this auction is very important, and it is led by futures. And some of you may know in share market, there's futures trading. People actually trade futures. What will be the price? And they will bet on some options. It's very interesting, complicated business segment. But futures actually look at the supply demand scenarios and where these commodity price will be. Crude future is massive, number one, I think, crude oil trade that goes on, right? It's very interesting. Supply demand, environmental, like a country had a flood or drought or whatever, and that the ability to export limits, and then ultimately the global supply demand imbalance, and then price goes up and then comes down as well, and mostly stable for last few years. But again, moving $1,000 up or down makes a big difference in many other industries. So I encourage you to search global dairy trade in Google, and then actually look and dig deeper, look at some of the trends, look at how it's done. This is managed by CME, Chicago Mercantile Exchange. So it's an independent party, not Fonterra, but owned by Fonterra. The platform is owned by Fonterra. And Amul was a seller. Amul pulled out. This is a multi-seller, multi-customer platform, auction platform. Okay, again, very busy slide. I don't want to waste too much time. The key messages here: US is actually very focused on corn price, because corn is the main feed cost, because US is feedlot farming, meaning the cow standing there, it's eating and giving milk. So they are constantly, in US farmer is constantly calculating how much cost of feeding the cow, how much money I'm getting at the other end. And if that number changes, they send the cow for culling. So if the number is profitable, the herd size increases. They don't send for culling, for killing. They call it culling. But if the number is unprofitable, US is the merciless, absolutely commercial dairy farmer. So when the global dairy price goes down, US herd actually shrinks, because they are surviving on the fresh dairy market, local market. But when the global dairy trade, global prices goes up, the herd size goes up, because they are making more money. So they don't send it to the meat factories. They hold on to their herd for a few more years, even at a lower productivity. But then obviously the productivity curve, they choose how long they will keep their cows in the barn and how much they will feed it. So all of that is directly related with how much they're consuming within the country and how much they're exporting. You will see mostly they export cheese and skim milk powder, some amount of butter, and then whey protein. Not much. They don't export, there's no whole milk powder in US. So it is very interesting dynamics. You go through these three major exporter: Europe, North America, US, and Australia, New Zealand. Australia is very tiny now these days, so New Zealand. So these are the three origination countries, sending to hundreds of consuming countries. Moving on. So you can see some of the Oceania meaning Australia, New Zealand. That is called Oceania combined. Oceania pricing, Europe pricing, US pricing, against how the US stock and all of those production, volume of production, and how the stock and changing, and how the pricing changing. So all of these insights are actually available. If someone is very interested, let me know. I'm happy to share. Very quick slide. I'll just move through it. Again, it talks about how the price movements are and where the originating and destination countries are. Mostly you'll see big green bubble in China. China has really gone through a massive amount of consumption as they have more disposable income. Dairy tends to be at the top end of the food chain. So when people have money, they eat dairy. But in India, it is staple. It is everywhere. So India is a very interesting case study. Anyway, moving on, again, production and forecast, and then ultimately the balance sheet. How much is the production? How much is the forecast? Where the price will be in 3 months, 6 months time? It is very important for seller, buyer, and trader in the middle. It is very important to understand where the market will be, because a lot of these supply chain are easily 3 months. Like when you are entering into a segment, when you are exporting, when you are playing into that, when you are investing, you need to know whether this is a profitable product. So some of these commodity product can actually give you a good insights where this dairy industry is globally. And then you can see the arbitrage between your local price and the global price, and between different country prices. Moving on quickly, I'll touch base with logistics. Logistics is a very, very important part of a export business. And these are all different types of pricing: X warehouse, FOB, free on board shipment, and then CIF, cost, insurance, and freight, and then DDP, delivered duty paid, and everything in between. And the next slide actually makes an effort to lay it out in a step by step, right? So X works at seller location, seller's risk, seller's cost. So it defines who's bearing the cost and who's bearing the risk. And all of these Incoterms, these are called Incoterms. These Incoterms have huge implication in the risk and pricing. So you need to understand at what is the Incoterm that is attached to your pricing. Your ex-factory price, a lot of buyer will not buy. Ideally they want product delivered in their warehouse, so their risk is minimal. When it is sailing through either air freight or ship, there is some risk, and then you cover it through insurance. And then also the risk of money when you get paid. Do you get paid when it reaches their port or their warehouse, their port, or at your port, or as soon as it leaves your factory? And this payment term defines your working capital, cash flow. So because there is a cost of money, cost of time value of money, right? So it is very interesting when you are thinking of doing business. You need to understand at what point you are getting paid. And then the customer will always try to squeeze you. They want to pay at their warehouse, and you want to get paid X your factory. So there is always tussle going on between. And then there are third party available invoice financing. There's a bank may come in and may finance the invoice based on the credibility of the customer and the supplier. So it is a big area. Supply chain, anybody interested in supply chain, this is crux of the international trade. Understanding Incoterm, understanding your cash flow, cash risk. And it is a massive risk. So whenever you are thinking you got a customer, no, you haven't got the money in your bank yet. Until you get the money in your bank. And also then, even if after you get paid and then something happens, the customer can claim back. They will go to your trade embassy and everywhere. They will create a mess and they won't come back. You lose the customer, you lose your reputational risk. So there's a massive amount of risk associated with international trade. You need to be prepared for that. Okay. Possibly we are towards end of the presentation. This is a value chain analysis. Value chain actually, it calculates step by step. It's a step by step costing, and ultimately calculating if it is 1 rupee X my factory, how much the customer pays and who is taking which share of the pie. And your goal is to minimize all the intermediaries cost, but you can't. these days supermarkets have massive amount of leverage on the end pricing. So my battery is going down. Okay, I do not have a power cord. I will get a power cord soon. So it is interesting that you need to understand the value chain and the cost of each of those component, the duty, the tariff, the shipment, the distributor margin, retailer margin, every broker margin, anything, and then you add on that and say you calculate. If you are doing B2C in a different country, you are exporting consumer packs. So that would be very interesting. It is important. Without understanding, one, you need to understand competition, at what point you want to sell, at what value you want to add, and where you want to pitch your product. And then you do the back calculation to understand where your cost structure is, how much margin you can make, and what are all the different share of the pie. So that it is very important. This is the crux of your profitable export business. Okay, moving on. Marketing, you need to, if you are doing these days, everything is online. I won't go to too much details, but here, whole lot of things you can do to actually do inbound and outbound marketing and bring your customers to you, right? And that there are trade shows at one end, which is costly, and there are Google and listing and B2B sites and all of those available. Some of those very quickly, I'll touch base some of the key risks on 3 case studies. I may be running out of time, so I won't do too much, but there are some serious risk in.
No, you can take your time, sir. You can take your time. No issue.
Now you have to give me 1 minute to get to my power cord. Huh?
Please.
Okay, give me a quick second.
Yeah. Meanwhile, all the audience who are there in YouTube, you are requested to put forward your questions in the chat box of YouTube, and so that we can, once we will finish, we'll take the questions one after another, and we'll also continue. And we also request you all to join sharp at 2:30 for our second and third sessions. Those will also be equally interesting. So you can, there would also listen about the food products from fruit and vegetables. Yes, sir, please continue.
Very quickly, some of the risk, I thought it is important to highlight the risk without understanding the risk, particularly in dairy. These are the 3 examples I have seen very closely. I was not at the center, but I was very close, and I have watched this unfolding. I'll start from the right, the Charlie Hebdo. My apologies if anyone religious, anything. My intention is not to hurt any religious sentiment. It is to give you an example of how religious issues can impact unknowingly, suddenly, and huge risk. There is obviously many people know Charlie Hebdo magazine. They are outspoken, and they created a cartoon with a bomb in Prophet Muhammad's head, and then that created furor in Middle East in 2006, and in Saudi they just banned. Whole lot of imams actually gave a verdict, and they came on TV and they said ban Arla products. And Arla is a Danish company that got heavily impacted by that one magazine, one carton. Can you imagine that? And Arla sale was 1.5 million per day in Saudi, Middle East. And they had to shut down. All their pipeline got filled up because supermarket products are not moving. And Arla had to close down factories after factories because their supply chain, the whole supply chain got clogged. And all the supermarkets removed Arla product. Like 1.5 million per day is massive business. And then suddenly Almarai picked up and filled that void. So Arla could never go back to their original market share. And Almarai actually doubled their share in that one incident, which I was privy to sell more product to Almarai, because Almarai was wanting to bump up their production. So they were buying more from Fonterra. So someone loses, someone gains. So I was on that instance, I was on the gainer side of Charlie Hebdo, that carton that really impacted Arla. Okay, the left one, China Melamine. China melamine, a lot of you actually know about this. And melamine is it's a plastic powder that got deposited into baby's tummy and plastic. So what is melamine? Melamine gives a false nitrogen reading. And so they were doing, adding those melamine. And I can actually vouch, because I have seen this unfolding. Chinese, it is a bounce, it is a boomerang of a policy. Chinese government suddenly came up with a strategy that to promote the domestic dairy, they suddenly gave a notice to all the dairy player that if you are using imported milk solids, you need to declare on your packaging made from imported milk. And that suddenly overnight created a massive disruption in the supply chain. Meaning, if you are using, say, imported milk solid, you have a product label. Now, even to make a label, it takes some time. So suddenly there was a brake applied on that. And suddenly the demand for local milk solid shot up because of that notice. And when some of these, obviously the melamine addition was there below the threshold level. But then between 2006, when the notice came out, and 2008, the level of melamine addition shot up in local milk. And that ended up killing babies. There were 3,000 babies who were sick, and 6 babies died, and all of those. And it hit the global media big time. And Fonterra lost a $300 million investment in a company called Sanlu, and Sanlu came under bad press. So I have seen senior directors and senior managers, their heads rolled. A lot of people had to leave job because they couldn't manage this risk. And the last one is a false alarm. Sorry, the last one is the middle one, New Zealand botulism scare. It was to an outsourced lab to test, and then outsourced lab gave a false positive, Clostridium botulinum. And then Fonterra had to do a precautionary recall of all the infant formula that Fonterra was making for Danone. Danone was an 80,000 ton of infant formula customer, over $1 billion customer of Fonterra, overnight gone. And all the products Danone had to recall from the shelf overnight. And then after 14 days, it was declared that it was a false positive. But by then, all the governments are talking. New Zealand Prime Minister had to go to China and message and all of those. And ultimately, Fonterra paid big damage to Danone. So it can be costly. That's the point. I'm done.
Yes, Vishita.
Yes, sir. So I can't thank you enough, sir, for such a wonderful talk and how you highlighted the practical insights about the differences in various markets like US, India, New Zealand, Middle East, and China, and their consumption pattern. Your in-depth analysis of NAFTA, Asian, and other trade treaties was very useful to understand the complete trade scenario. The emphasis that you put on the key messages like why milk powder is exported in high volume, how infrastructure and shelf life plays an important role in exports, how realization of core competitiveness is important in order to formulate the policies for trade, whether if you want to go completely closed in trade or completely open in trade, or you want to rearrange the trade policies according to the target market. Fourth, it is also very important that you should have a balance of trade, which you currently highlighted, management of demand and supply in the particular commodities. Also, you gave a very detailed explanation of the complete traceability of the dairy products in New Zealand, which could be replicated in India if possible. Also, revealing the risks in this segment related to the food safety hazards that you discussed in the last slide by enhancing the real life cases And that makes us very much aware about how important is the quality of the product and how much loss it can cause if the quality fails. Thank you so much, sir. Now I would like to request Dr. Samitatta to pose some questions on the behalf of our participants. Over to you, sir.
Yes, yes, thank you, Vishta. Thank you, the expert speaker, Mr. Rajesh Chatterjee. It is a wonderful, wonderful presentation, and we got really very good. And our participants also got very useful, and very encouraging comments. Lot of thanks to you. Before taking up questions, actually there are a lot of questions also. I do not know how many we will be able to take, but we would surely like to take a few of them. Before that, I would just like to tell Dr. Pundish sir to give his comments.
Actually, Dr. Samit, really, you already have said that words which towards Mr. Chatterjee, we all should say, must say rather. It's a wonderful presentation, Mr. Chatterjee, and we were very eager to listen, but we were not knowing. We also know something about in this area, something about trade. But your presentation is very well in line with the intent and the basic objective of this project. Basically, this project of market intelligence is meant for higher education students, faculties. And when we see the analysis you have done, the way you have presented, number of perspectives have come out, which need to be addressed by the students, by the scholars, by the faculties, by doing rigorous analysis. This is very, very important point. But definitely there are some questions. Ultimately, yes, academic presentation and the presentation for those who want to do the business, who want a business, what for we are here. From my side, Samit said, but I have, before Samit has maybe many questions, but I was a loser. I could not attend this fully, but I have one small question towards you, Mr. Chatterjee.
Please, sir, please.
Yeah, just. Yes, just यहाँ से करना पड़ेगा. यहाँ से करना पड़ेगा. Yes. Actually, yes, speaker. Hello, I think, can you hear?
Audible, sir.
Audible, sir. So the basic question, not the specific question on any segment of your presentations, well analyzed. The basic questions when we see our dairy industry, particularly the products and their export competitiveness, the basic question is that whether the data available which we analyze to see the competitiveness of many countries, particularly Oceania regions, Mr. Chitra, you may agree, is the most important one in the international trade. And because the minimum or maybe the lowest cost of production in Oceania region, New Zealand, Australia, both. Yeah. Okay, but when we see the international trade, a broad questions, I am asking broad question, data is not available. Whether it is China or maybe the European Union particularly. So how much subsidy they are putting into these sectors towards the farmers, which we cannot catch through the WTO norms. That is the point. Suppose government of India does not take some steps, which we may call sometimes some analysts say that is adosism policy of government of India. You have mentioned this one point against which I am raising this question, that Indian market is protected. We do not agree with that. And I would like some response for your side, because if even this minimum restriction is not put here by government of India, what will happen to the farmers? You will be surprised to know even today, overall, if we see that the developed countries, particularly European Union and US, per hectare, this subsidy is more than $40. In India, it is less than 16 to be less than 20 to be 16 to 18. But we cannot catch this thing in the trade because data is not available. And even we cannot analyze these things in the light of the WTO norms, which we know. These are the points. And if the government does not address these things, then what will happen to the farmers? Farmers will be the loser. This is a point on which I would like to draw your attention. But this is beyond the trade analysis. As a person who is looking at the international trade, this is my question, maybe at the first or maybe at the end. I would like something. Overall, wonderful. Yeah.
No, you have rolled the ball. Let us start with your question only. Yes, please, Mr. Chatterjee.
Dr. Pandit, you have absolutely nailed it on its head. That is the crux of global dairy trade. Your question sits at the center of global dairy trade. And all the FTA, free trade agreement, and everything else that goes on, your question sits at the top table. So Very, very valid, very valid question, right? Number one. Number two, I don't, I can give you case studies from multiple countries. I'll give you case study from New Zealand. In 70s, New Zealand actually removed all subsidies. None of the farmers get any subsidy. It is zero, nada, nothing. So there is no subsidy. What New Zealand has done, they moved the subsidy money to the front end, innovation end. So it's making productivity, say the artificial insemination, the all of those serum, like genetics research, all of those lot of funding at the front end. So New Zealand has particularly successfully, I don't know, it's difficult. New Zealand has successfully moved the money from the back end to the front end. It is genetic research, it is the supply chain, it is the carbon reduction research, it is new product development, new technology, NTD, NPD, new product, new technology to value add, doing it as sustainably, like bioplastics and managing the waste and all of those, and calf well-being, like cow and calf welfare and all of those. So what I'm saying here, I think it's almost too good to be true in New Zealand perspective, but this country has managed to achieve it. So moved total subsidy from the back end to the front end. It gives a lot of subsidy or 50-50 joint venture to the innovation. So a lot of these universities and research organizations are getting lots of fund, literally lots of fund from government to do the research at the front end. And academics are very happy, and scientists and capability, core capability, center of excellence system, and there is a innovation ecosystem going on with that money. So the subsidy has moved from the back end to the front end. I
So,
know.
Dr. Chatterjee, we can say that this is the right example and maybe the practical things to use the subsidy for green box. Because the
Yep.
New Zealand is using these all things subsidies under green box. This is the right way. I think even India cannot do much. We are using these subsidies. I think the way New Zealand is using, I think the wonderful way. This is a case study for others. But I think what you are saying, this kind of, though we know these things, even this, just I am taking 1 minute because this question is like that. Like this IFCN, International Farm Comparison Network, they are putting this Oceanian region, including this New Zealand, Australia, all on top. And I think even they have not analyzed this point as far as my little knowledge goes into that. And this is very important, which I think anybody would, would appreciate. But this is a question which protect the country from the broad perspectives. Anyway, sir, it's all right, sir. It means we need to pay attention on green box. Yeah.
Very good question. And I know I have seen many debates and many conferences where US gives a lot of subsidy to its farmers because of the political lobby or their bargain. Europe gives a lot of subsidies to the farmers in and out. So and then before the WTO meeting, they withdraw the subsidy. As soon as they come out of WTO meeting, they give the subsidy again till the next WTO meeting. So these games are on. I totally understand what you're saying. Somehow New Zealand is a case study where they have managed to move the subsidy money from the back end to the front end. That's all.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Punit sir. Thank you, Chatterjee. Now let us go some other questions. There are actually, our audience is also very heterogeneous, so there are different type of questions. Let us start with one question which says that, sir, you mentioned New Zealand removed all the subsidies from raw milk production to get competitive in global market. So please explain how exactly does it work? It's not giving subsidy, how it is helping.
I'll give you a couple of pointers. One of the pointer is New Zealand companies or the agribusiness companies, they have set a target. They do not adjust their budget to the inflation. So there is about 2.5 to 3% inflation in New Zealand. And they are saying, we are not going to adjust our budget to inflation. So that means every year they're beating inflation. You do that for 10 years, you become super efficient. If you do not increase your cost of production every year, 2.5, 3%, right? So that is one pointer. I'm just giving you example, real life example, what I have seen these guys are doing, right? Number one. Number two, they have obviously their, even the local domestic price are same as international price. There is no subsidy for the domestic price. So, and then all the New Zealanders are screaming, why do we have to pay international price? And farmers are saying, why do I have to subsidize you? It's a free market. So because of the export supply chain is such efficient and established, if so that there is no arbitrage, no price difference between domestic market price and international market price. A farmer can easily switch between domestic supply to international supply. And that not very good for New Zealand consumers, but who cares? Why farmers will be subsidizing the New Zealand consumers when they have the global market to pay for the highest return? And number three, with the global price goes up and down, the farming community and their return goes up and down. The farmers look at it's a long-term business. It is not 1 year in, 1 year out, next year out business. No, they are in a generational business. They're in a business that goes from generation to generation, gets handed over into. So a farmer does the farming and then they retire and then either they sell or exit or they hand over to their next generation. So it is a long-term commitment. And what that has done by removing subsidies, it has forced the farmers to innovate at the highest productivity level. So if you look at the productivity and if you look at the quality, it at the highest quality level and at the highest lowest cost of conversion level and at a globally competitive price and quality. And it all starts from the customer. Customer is, if the customer is willing to pay for your quality and product, that's what drives the back end cost. And over the years, it actually flattens and moves the waste out of the system. So it gets efficient and efficient and efficient. So I totally respect Dr. Punde's question. It is very difficult to change, but you have to have a long-term vision and you have to have, if you want to play in that international trade, is the only way. You have to expose your industry and then let it compete and become competitive. And it will find innovation. It will find optimized value chain. It will find its way to compete.
Right. Thank you. There is one more question on exactly. What is the import of dairy product situation in New Zealand? New Zealand imports from whom? What are the products? Do they import?
Yes.
So there is
it is open border, as I said before. It is open border. So like ethnic like us, Indians, we have a lot of Indian shops. And Indian shops are full of Amul ghee, Amul butter, Amul everything. So
right.
it is open border, but there has to be a consumer for that product. So
in value terms, what will be the export and import? What is
very nominal? Very nominal. It may be just 10 containers per month. That's all. And so it is about, there has to be a customer for your product. New Zealand is not a customer for big milk powder or big cheese or anything like that. If you have a brand, correct, not a commodity. New Zealand is not a commodity buyer because unlikely you will be able to compete exporting commodity with the amount of commodity these guys are making.
Right. Okay, thank you. The next question says that it is about India, that it says that because of this tension with China, so does it going to affect the export of China, of India and China in milk products? But I think India is not importing from China. I mean, it is already stopped.
Yeah, India is not importing. So it will impact on other trade. Yes, trade, and that was my last slide, that there is a lot of tension, political and other forces on global trade. What the leaders do, they stop the trade. One example you may know that Malaysian government was not talking in line with the Indian interest, and Indian government overnight stopped the palm oil import, and Malaysian palm oil exporter were in deep trouble, and they have their the containers lined up, and nothing is getting imported. So it is a very high risk. Political risk is the biggest risk in international trade. So it
Yes.
depends on your government playing the ball with another government that you are doing the trade.
Right. Another thing is a very general question, that how carbon credit or carbon finance will help in agri-business or agri-entrepreneurship.
I spent
How they're going to play a role.
I spent a Christmas holiday, almost 1 month, studying the New Zealand carbon policy and carbon credit system and all of those. And I can tell you, it hasn't reached the threshold. It is below threshold at the moment. It doesn't feature. There is a sustainability story. New Zealand, there was a Labour government got elected last time, and Labour was in coalition with Green Party here. And suddenly I see Fonterra coming up with a whole lot of sustainability green strategy because green is in power. So it is with the power, the government and the interest, industries respond to it. But New Zealand has got, like Fonterra has got a clear policy to move out of coal-fired boiler by 2030. So there won't be any coal-fired boiler here. And there are a lot of fund and I talked about the moving the fund to innovation. There are a lot of research, platform research going on, like cows not to generate methane, because cows is the dairy industry is the biggest generator of methane, and methane is the biggest contributor of global warming. So there are a lot of fundamental research going on cow digestion system or additive or giving something to cows that will actually convert the methane, break it down right at the digestive system, things like that. So it's the carbon credit. I do not think carbon credit will be traded so easily. It is below the threshold, as I said. However, the sustainability story is very important, particularly if you are doing business with Europe. Europe is big on sustainability and cow welfare, the calf welfare and everything. So unless you are treating your animal with the right treatment, I'm not interested to do business with you. Things like that.
Okay, thank you. One more question on, can you throw some light on why the cost of production of milk in New Zealand is almost half of that in Western Europe and North America?
Correct. And the key reason I will tell you, you need to come to New Zealand to see it. As soon as you get out of a city, in 5 minutes drive, you see green rolling hills and land. The biggest agriculture in New Zealand is grass. So lots of land, very few people, and it's generating grass. And grass, cows are simply outside. There is no barn, no house for cows. Cows are standing day, night, winter, summer under the trees and snow or hail or whatever it may be, and they're just eating grass. But they know at 4 a.m. and 4 p.m. they will start walking towards the milking shed on their own. Nobody is pushing them. They will line up and they will keep coming to the milking shed, and they will get milked and they will go back to their patch. So the all farmer will have to do is allocate a patch, and they move the patch like in their, say, 50 hectares, right? And they are moving, okay, today this patch they will eat, tomorrow this patch, and the farmer will rotate the cows bit through the patches so that it's not widely left out to go everywhere in the 50 hectare. It just goes into a marked area, and all the cows will go there, they will eat, and they will come back to the milking. And next day, they are being guided to another patch where the grasses are longer. So it is very, like, up to 500 cows, there's only one farmer. Only one. No one else. So that's where the cost of conversion is low. That's the main thing. Is it's pasture fed, grass fed, number one. So nobody is bringing the feed to cows. No, cows are just going and eating themselves. And the feed are costly. Cattle feed is costly. You can't beat a grass naturally growing. Yes, there's a cost of land, but rural land, that's fine. So that's where the number one cost advantage of New Zealand is its pasture fed. and it is a very low labor intensive. And then at a commodity processing level, it is a very high scale. I talked about 30 ton per hour dryer. We only have, I think, one dryer, 30 ton per day, Banaskanta, in India, I think.
Now it's 100 tons in there. 100 tons are there.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So one dryer, 100 ton.
Yeah.
Good. So the dryers are massive, and it is all robot and automation, whole lot of cameras, and it's really, really massive. So they just unloading a tanker, 28,000 liters tanker within 3 minutes. Boom, gone. And getting dry, evaporated, dried, and packed in 3 hours time. It's already palletized and waiting to be loaded into the container. And some of the stores are AVG, automated AGV, automatic guided vehicles. There's no one. They call it light out stores. There's not a light. The robotic the palletizer is picking up from palletizing, and supervisor allocating some store location, and it is dropping the and stacking the pallets. It is
Okay.
very highly automated industry at the processing end, and at the production end, farming end is very low cost because pasture fed.
Okay. There are two related questions. One is, which commodity or commodities do you think India as a India will be competitive in global trade of dairy commodities at present and in upcoming years? And the second one is, can you give some suggestions for Indian dairy farmers and cooperatives to increase the export of dairy commodities from India, keeping the trade barriers constant?
It is. I do not have a magic bullet. It is $1 billion industry, and India will need to find its way. I'm too small a fish to recommend anything. What I have observed, though, I think there's a niche that India can really do well is organic dairy. Organic dairy is growing, the consumption is growing, the category is huge growth. So organic dairy milk products, I think a lot of Indian farmers are near organic and they love the organic way. So it is natural. Some of the states are going organic. And I think there's a big push on organic as well. I think that's a real opportunity for India to enter at the top end of the market rather than trying to compete at the commodity end, because commodity end, you have, you need high yielding animals, you need lowest cost feed, you need high production throughput factories, you need higher quality, and the market entry strategy is always same quality lower price, or same or same quality lower price, or same price higher quality, something like that, right? So you have to differentiate. If you're asking same price, you have to give a reason to go up, right? Why the customer will switch from their current supplier to you. So you have to give a reason. Either you give a quality lever up, or you give a price down, right? Now, price down is very easy. Everybody can lower the price, but that's a very bad business model. You are actually returning low for your own people and farmers, right? So to push the price up, I think you have to grab a differentiated value proposition, which organic actually fits very nicely. And some of the certification that I talked about, that's the reason that I talked
Yes.
about. And then
Very, very specifically, you have mentioned that proper certification through channels,
that
and that
gives
will
you the correct.
will improve the
That gives you
quality
the
also.
right.
So,
You go.
yeah.
Okay, that gives you the access to those niche market where they are willing to pay you a premium price.
Right.
So the certification, understanding the levers, and then playing those levers to get into the higher end of the market. I do not believe, I do not believe any time. Yes, Middle East, possibly. India and Amul does a lot of export to Middle East. Middle East, possibly a market where India is very advantageous, had got some advantage to export to. I think Middle East is a very good market. Dubai is very close, and lots of Indians, lots of ethnic population. So I think Middle East is as a market for India, Middle East is attractive. However, as I told before, Middle East has got huge volume, but not value. And I think US has got huge volume, huge value. So I think anyone aspiring to export dairy should be looking at US. and understanding what the US market is appreciating, and then finding either B2B, B2B2C. So you are supplying to another business that will cater to the consumer product, or B2C directly, which is challenging always, but it's possible to do it. Lots of Indian companies are doing it, B2C business in US, selling in Walmart, selling in Costco, selling in Sam's Club, and all of those, massive volume and value. So organic would be one, and certifications would be another one.
Do you say any, I mean, say like in Gujarat, we have a lot of startups, small companies who are actually selling a lot of food products like papads and all in US and in all developed countries. So do you see similar trend can happen in case of milk traditional products, means which are not available there for the diaspora there? So means it is there, but I think the volume is very low, means as compared to any other ethnic food products. So is there a scope for the startups?
If you ask me, I'm not interested to sell to ethnic market. You ask me why?
Why?
Indians don't want to pay. We Indians don't like paying price. So we are price, we look for the price cutter. Where there is a discount, we'll buy. So we like the trading down. We do not particularly enjoy as a nation or as a community trading up. We love trading
No,
down.
I'm talking about exporting those products.
I'm talking about export. I'm talking about now
Okay.
you are going to ethnic market in US, and the Indians that are buying from the Indian shops, they are looking for the cheap goals, or the distributor or the retailer is squeezing the supplier, absolutely squeezing the supplier. So if you ask me, I'm not interested to sell into ethnic market, to be honest. It's a cutthroat market. Correct.
A niche like organic or something will be better. I mean,
Unless you have a very well innovative or well recognized brand, then you can make money through volume. But if you are a startup and then you are trying to sell to a lower price segment, imagine how long you will sustain, right? With your cash burn, you are burning cash, right? So if you ask me, my experience tells me you have to find a value add segment, and you have to find customers beyond ethnic market in the first world, meaning you need to feed the 95% Americans, not the 5% Indians or 3% Indians. That is my challenge to you, all of you, right?
No, it's very nicely you have put it. I think it will be very clear to all the participants. Okay, I think we are approaching the end time. I will take a last question. Why no WMP in US in dairy data? Means I think you have mentioned that somebody has put a question on that.
I don't know. Even India doesn't produce WMP. I don't know why. I do not know. It is only New Zealand that is producing WMP for some reason or other. That is my question as well. But I think it comes with a differentiated usage of different stream, meaning the milk fat getting into butter or AMF or getting into fresh dairy. So you have excess NFDM, non-fat milk product, dry milk, right? So SMP. So sometimes there is a disbalance between the stream return or stream usage, SNF versus fat. And in India, it is the fat is premium, goes into ghee segment, right? So then you have a whole lot of SNF in excess. US possibly similar. So this disbalance actually doesn't give you a stable WMP allocation, right? It is not difficult to produce. WMP is similar to skim milk powder. I don't think any difference, but it is how they have optimized their milk bucket of milk.
Right. Thanks a lot. I think with this we will end this session. But before that, I'll again tell, means for our this center also probably we have to again come back to you for different guidance and suggestions. And the talk was wonderful. Means we got a very good response and exactly what we are looking for. The kind of knowledge and information we are looking for. We got it completely. With this, I'll hand it over to Vishita to close it a session, right?
Thank you so much, sir. Truly, as said by Samit sir also, the talk was wonderful. The way you interacted with all of the participants and the way you answered the questions. Some questions which were indirect and needed a diplomatic kind of an answer, you really did it nicely. And also satisfied all our queries, which were technical in front. So thank you so much, sir. We would obviously be longing for further more interactions to get detailed insights from you regarding global dairy trade, as that is one of the key objective of our project. And it was really nice talking to you. Thank you so much, sir.
It's a privilege and pleasure talking to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank